Is this the societies though? No. All right, looks like we are now live on Facebook. So sorry. We thought we were live a few minutes ago, but technology, it's really fun. So this is the segment of Coffee with Cathy. It's done every Friday. I am Cathy Dionne, the Executive Director for the Autism Society of Maine. And I have a guest with me every week. And this week it is Ben Jones. If you'd like to kind of introduce yourself again, Ben, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm still the same person as before. So I'm Ben Jones. I'm an attorney over at Disability Rights Maine. I'm sure most people are familiar with us, but I represent kids all across the state to do with education. And my other half is Atlee Riley, and together we cover the state. And the quick disclaimer I'll say for this is we're going to keep it casual, but if you can keep it not too specific about your own kiddo, you know, kind of keep it broader brush, more general, because if it is a specific legal issue that you have, I'll encourage you definitely just to call DRM, do an intake, and we can see if we can help. But I'll be able to cover all the topics now in a general way.
That's great, because I think, you know, the topic today that we're talking about really is, and I think we could talk about this topic over and over and over again, because there's so many families that have different things that come up. We all know special education is confusing. The guides that they have out there is even hard for families to understand. And then throw in a pandemic on top of it, and it just is confusing and overwhelming for a lot of families. So I'm going to remind everybody, if you have specific questions, just type in the comment section, and I'll be asking, you know, Ben, those questions. Again, remember that if they're not, you know, too specific, but, you know, so you can do that broad brush with it and let you know what the law says and different things. So, so from, I guess for the first thing that I wanted to dive into with it was, many families have a current IEP, or they might even have an IEP that's coming up. And how do they look at their IEPs? Is it looked at any differently? And so is there any way we can just dive into what that would look like right now during school closings, or not closings, but online?
Yeah, absolutely. That is an important distinction to make. So schools aren't closed. The buildings might be closed, but as far as I know, every school in the state is open for business, and most of them are all doing some kind of distance learning plan. I would say first off, families should expect that their kiddos have access to the curriculum that all the other kids have access to. So if a school is doing, you know, a physical packet a week, and then 2 Zoom meetings on Tuesday and Thursday, and that's available to all the kids in, let's say, 3rd grade, every kid should have access to that. So that's on a basic level. Kids should have access to the same things that all the other kids are. To your question, though, about IEPs, as we know, is just a hyper individualized plan that's on top of the regular things that are offered to all kids to provide that individual kid free, appropriate public education, FAPE as we call it. And as we know too now, things just look a lot different, and the paperwork should still look the same. I guess I'll point that out first. So at first there were we were hearing some rumblings of some districts that were saying, well, let's just change all the IEPs to be distance learning. Well, that ignores the fact that the kids still need what was written in the IEP. The kids haven't changed. They might have changed, you know, they might have changed a little bit, but their needs haven't changed. So the IEP should still be written in a bubble. You know, here's all the things that a kiddo needs. It should maintain. And if the dates elapse during the closure time, then there's an expectation that it will just keep on going. So the DOE has even said, the main DOE has said, if the IEP elapses during the disruption time, just continue on with the IEP. You don't have to have an IEP meeting to say, okay, we got a new date. So I think people are being selective about when to have meetings.
What would a family do though if the school district said, no, we have to hold the IEP? Do they have grounds there to say, according to DOE, or?
Well, I mean, so DOE is not saying that you can't have a meeting, or that people have to have them. You know, it's a lot more soft. It's just saying people can have IEP meetings. They should have them in creative ways if they need to. And if there's if it's just a matter of dates, if the date's going to elapse, the expire, then people shouldn't worry about that. Just keep implementing the IEP as it's written. But as your question was, what if a district says, we're having an IEP meeting next week, it's just happening, you better show up, then I would encourage families to stay closely connected with the school, respond. If that's not a good date, come up with a better date. If that's not a good venue like Zoom or the phone, maybe ask about an in-person meeting. They could definitely do that if there was appropriate social distancing and all of the requirements. So I think families should ask for an appropriate setting for the meeting. And ultimately, if it just doesn't work, ask to reschedule it for another time. And if it comes down to a real head, if there's a real confrontation about the meeting time, parents can always move up the chain and complain about that, especially if something happens without them involved, because there would be a lot of problems if a school just held a meeting and said, we're changing your IEP, here's what's going to say, you didn't show up, tough luck. There'd be some problems with that.
So you meaning like legality problems where the family is saying, hey, I gave a couple of dates, you went on without me, and you drastically changed my son's IEP.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
There would be issues with, was there proper notice to the family? Were they participating? Those are all things that are required. So anyway, that's something to look out for. I haven't heard that happening. I've heard more the other way. I've heard of a lot of people had IEP meetings scheduled, and maybe right before or maybe during the closure time. And schools just roundly said, we're not having meetings, yours is canceled, which is to be expected somewhat. There'd be some rescheduling maybe, but I think they're probably going to run into some problems if they just say there's no IEP meetings while we're doing remote learning at all. I mean, the biggest problem, sorry.
Yeah, I had a parent who was asking a question, and it's specific to what we're talking about is if you missed an IEP due to the COVID-19, so an IEP was scheduled and you missed it, and the school refuses to hold one because they claim they're closed. Is that?
I've heard more of that happening than the other way, which was saying we're going to have a meeting, you better show up. And so the rights to do with that when that happens is you really want to first document things. So respond to the school and say, we had an IEP meeting scheduled for X day. It's too bad it didn't get to happen. Here's 3 days that I'm free in the next month, and I can do Zoom, I can do Google, I can do the phone. I'm open to different things, and just be reasonable and come up with some ideas. And ultimately, if they say we're not having any meetings, you might want to complain to DOE about that, because that's really cutting out the parent in the process. And at this point too, there's all these different phases. So we had most schools closed on March 16th and then we had this first phase of about 5 weeks before April vacation. And there was during that time, everybody's trying to figure out what to do. They're coming up with plans. They're reaching out to families. A lot of focus on basic needs, food and safety. And now now we've had 2 weeks since April vacation, and we still got another 4 to 5 to 6 weeks of school. So I think at this point we should shift from the mindset of, okay, people are figuring out their stuff. We're forgiving about all these different things, and now some more expectations. Like there should be contact, there should be some plan, there should be something more regular at this point, I think.
Have you heard from some of the families? Because we have heard from some families that are talking about their school hasn't even reached out to them. I mean, what are these families supposed to be doing?
Right. That's bad. I mean, we're trying to figure out where the lines in the sand are, what's appropriate, what's not, what families should expect. And at this point, like I said, we've already had, 7 weeks really of school since the closure. And I would expect that they should have had contact that's inexcusable, I think. And so I would encourage them to reach out to DOE, maybe file a quick complaint. The complaint system's pretty easy. You can just Google.
Can you talk about that? How they file that complaint? Right.
So, and they can always reach out to us too, to see if we might be able to support them. in filing that complaint, or help some advocacy. But if they want to just go on their own, I mean, it's a pretty parent-friendly procedure. You can go onto the DOE website, or you can just Google DOE, MDOE, dispute resolution. That should bring you to the page that talks about mediations and complaints and due process hearings. And the complaint process is the one that asks the state to investigate. And so, and a parent could just write in a real quick thing. It's all the demographic information, and then a quick thing that says, hey, I haven't heard anything from my school. It sounds like most people have heard something, and I really just think I should have, there's something more should be going on. At the very least, I should hear from them. So that would trigger them to get involved, and maybe that's enough to kick the school into gear. So that's a way to do things too.
One of the other things that I was hearing, and I hear it because I know one of our staff members here joins them, but the Department of Education is also holding meetings. Is it every day at 10 a.m.? And I think those are open to the general public. Is that not true? Or?
Well, there's a lot of different meetings going on. You might be talking about the special ed directors meeting.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Erin Frazier is the head of special services for the state, and she does hold a meeting for special ed directors. I think that's more of a internal and professional, you know, feedback loop. And I think those are, I do think they're open to the public, and they're also posted so you can view them later. Those are less formal though, you know, those are to answer questions for direct, but on top of that, there's these office hours that are happening for DOE, which could be helpful for families, or definitely for some staff for schools. And they've got, I believe it's every hour, a different topic. And it starts off the day with like a social emotional aspect. And then there's some content area, you know, whether it's, you know, behavior support, or it's OT, or it's math. They'll have those different office hours, and those are every day. So I think there's up to maybe 10 of those a day.
Is it called, I just want to back up. It's through the Maine Department of Education. So the MDOE, and then Is it something that says office hours or?
Yeah, again, I mean, I send people to Google because I get lost when I try to get into maine.gov and then search something.
We'll try to find it, and then we'll put it in the chat box for people.
Good idea. Yep, that's great. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because that seems like a neat idea. I think, you know, families, when you're meeting in person and you're sitting around that table and you've got those 15 professionals and everything, it's very intimidating. So I also wonder if it's either more intimidating online or less intimidating online now.
It's a good question. Yeah, I just talked to a family who went to an IEP meeting 2 days ago, and you almost had the right number, 14. So there were 14 professionals there, and then mom. And so she said that it was less overwhelming and it was more cumbersome. So everybody wanted to say something, and they had set aside an hour and a half. And so 15 people talking during an hour and a half, that's, you know, only a couple minutes a person. So I think that's something maybe to address before a meeting and say, well, do we really need X and X and X person at the meeting? Because this is really only about speech services, and, you know, so there might be something like that to make the Zoom meeting go smoother, because I would see it possibly being overwhelming, but definitely confusing. Yeah.
What about when you have a student who has their IEP, and it's an ongoing IEP, it's not due, it's just, you know, continuing, but it has certain things in there like your speech, your OT, and they're not getting those. Is there anything they can do to receive those services, or is it really up to the district?
Well, all of this is up to the district for sure. I think there's room there to advocate. So, you know, again, we're just trying to figure out what people should be expecting to receive. And like I said, kind of setting the very bottom would be access to the same thing all the other kids are getting access to, communication from the school regularly, and some addressing of everything in the IEP. So I'm using that term, like address every part of the IEP. And the term that the DOE is using too is follow the intent of the IEP. So I think that aligns pretty well. So if there's I think you said speech
Speech or OT or, yeah.
speech or OT. So using those as an example, I think it's likely, it's likely less reasonable to expect the same minute for minute every week, and more reasonable to expect that there's some kind of OT happening every week, some kind of special of speech. So I think that there's room there to push back on the school and say, okay, this has been going well. We're glad that we've had the academics lined up. The Zoom is working, the Google Hangout is working, but we're still missing the OT part. And ask for the OT person to be involved, ask for, some kind of regular contact with the OT. Ultimately, if they don't get anywhere, they could complain about things. But really a lot of the impact of missing out on things are going to be more of a retrospective. I think it's probably most important to focus now on getting access to whatever can be gotten access to. And then after this dust has settled a bit, then looking back and saying, well, did they really do what they could have done? Because they're supposed to be doing it to the maximum extent possible, providing what they can.
What about, another area that I've heard some families talking about is, because now basically they're becoming their students' teachers,
Right.
So their mom and dad and the teacher.
Yep.
I've heard that parents should be keeping track of making notes or writing something down every day in some sort of journal. So when their children go back to school, then they have a journal that can document where they saw maybe their deficits, where they were doing really well. Is that a recommendation, a good idea?
I think that's very smart. Again, it's whatever was within the capacity of the parent. Like you said, they're strapped, they're doing everything. They're now a teacher. If they've got the time and the ability, I would keep track of stuff, and keeping track of things like communication with the school, how often, how frequent, is it adequate? Kind of aligning with the IEP, just say, well, how close am I getting to getting the IEP services? And some kind of daily log about, well, the school offered up, an hour Zoom hangout with the team, with the class. And then they followed up with 3 assignments and, the best you can. So I think it's good to keep track of, because later, like you said, later it's going to become important to be able to see what kids had access to, and also whether they were progressing or regressing.
Would the families have any rights around, if they saw a significant regression in certain areas? Is there going to be something when they go back, to school in September, and then
Right.
say, well, this is what we saw? Do they have any rights there, or do you think the school will be more like, well, that's just your notes? And I guess
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. There's plenty of rights, and just to highlight on the rights, no rights have been lost during this time. There was an opportunity for the US DOE to do some waivers to IDEA and to 504, and they didn't really. There were a few things, but they're not substantive. So really all the same rights are intact, and those include the right to complain that a kiddo didn't get access to free, appropriate public education. So there'll be opportunities for people to challenge what was offered now and whether it was adequate or not. And that's when that would become important, to keep track of, like you said, like a log, or the progress or regress. I think the important thing is going to be, we'll just use September as this, this date. We all know, who knows. So September, people are back and there's some normalcy regained. The team should meet and say, where are we at? So it's probably less about, you started here and this is what happened during the middle and you're here. I think it's just looking right at here and being like, let's plan for this kid that we see today. And so that's probably the most primary thing. And then you can always look back and assess whether that was appropriate. But I think it's going to be taking kids where they are.
Another area, and I'm going to look at my comments coming up, and
Yeah.
Nancy's joined us from the Developmental Disability Council.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
So Nancy's asking about FAPE during the COVID virus, and she wanted to make sure that we're pointing out that the Maine Developmental Disability Council actually is going to be giving out, some iPads to families
Right.
needed, because during school, if your child has assisted technology, this is another area where I've heard a couple of families where they're not getting their child's laptop, or they're not getting their child's technology because the school owns it, and they
Right.
didn't want it to go home to get broken. Or we have a family who their child has technology, and the school and the family is feeling a little hesitant about taking it home, and so that they would have to pay for anything that gets broken.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm glad Nancy.
yeah, what's underneath laws around that? I mean, if other children are getting technology and iPads, shouldn't individuals with disability get theirs?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. I would say that just straight up yes. And then on top of that, if a kiddo needs something beyond what all the other kids are having access to, that's when it would become more about the individual kiddo and access, reasonable accommodations, those types of things.
Yeah.
So I'm glad Nancy highlighted that. I'm glad they still have some laptop iPads.
Yeah, no, she just told me that, they had over 450 applications, only had 150 iPads. So it looks like
Okay.
her iPads are gone.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
so more services like that is needed. That goes to show us that if 450 people needed these and they didn't get them and only 150 did, why aren't some of these others having their technology? I mean, and I speak as a parent who also has a child, and an adult, he's 26, but
Yep.
he has an iPad. I can't tell you how him not having his iPad all the time would affect him. I can't even go down that path. To me, it's just,
Right.
it's part of that's how they speak, that's how they communicate. And when
Right.
a school holds that back, because they're afraid either it's going to get broken. And yes, sometimes our children have challenges that we have to deal with. It's still not fair for them not to have their technology. Is there any other sources that you know of that they can get for technology, or?
Yeah. So I know the DOE is working on this. They have kind of an informal task force headed up by Paige Nichols at MDOE. And they have some cache, some stock of tablets. I don't know if they're tablets or the laptops, but they're internet enabled. And then they're also providing internet service along with that. So I know we've asked them, is there some number to call that they get this thing? And they said, well, they should first start with their school, reach out to their school principal and just say, we need technology. We don't have any, and it's impeding our ability to access education. Can we get some? And they can mention this program and say, well, we understand that DOE has some that they're administering. Can we get in touch with them? Can we work with them? So I think there is others available.
And what about, I don't know if you're able to touch base on it, but like right now, there's another meeting going on through the Disability Rights Maine on assistive technology. Is that something where they may need to hear from families too, or you think that would be helpful or not?
Us to do with assistive technology outside of school?
Assisted technology, whether they're in school or adults, or I'm not sure what your, if you go to both, right? Whether it's children or adults.
I represent just kids.
Right.
But DRM, we
Right.
as a whole, we represent every age.
Right.
So I'd say yes, definitely reach out. If they're trying to access a service that is provided, whether it's from DHHS or from your school district or wherever, and assistive technology will enable somebody to access that service, and that's a problem, they're hitting roadblocks, then yeah, I would hope they would reach out to us, because that can be your key, your communication, your understanding can be through that technology.
Yeah, and I think, I know we're talking about children and school technology and having access under FAPE, and that should be their right to have that. I hope parents, have that takeaway from that today, that, oh, so my daughter has a laptop, she's in a typically developing classroom. My son's in a typically developing classroom, but he has an IEP and he didn't get his laptop. That should be key, that, yeah, you need to be reaching out to that school district, and he's entitled to have his, laptop too.
Yeah, it's all about equal access. So
Yeah.
it can look different for every kid. Like you said, if the kiddo might have broken the last 12 iPads, perhaps it comes in a different form. Perhaps it's a rugged one. Perhaps there's another way that they're able to access online. The point is access. So it doesn't have to be the exact same brand, the exact same thing, but they both have to be able to access the thing, which is the classroom instruction. So
Yeah.
that can be.
So I have, let me see here. Let me see. Kendra's joined us. So hi, Kendra. So Kendra is asking about, she's working with a child who started the IEP qualification process about a month ago before the remote learning had started. So this was prior to remote learning. Okay. And the IEP qualification process stopped because the school is closed. Again, I hate it when I hear that the school's closed, because they're not really closed.
Right.
How does that affect the timeline? Should they try to do some of this via online technology, Zoom, Google? And she recognizes the classroom observation is not really possible. However, can any other steps be completed?
I would say yes. So like I said, to do with the waivers with US DOE, there weren't any real substantive waivers and nothing to do with timelines. So those timelines are still live, and so that process should still be going on. There's also just the practical aspect, like you said, there's no classroom observation to do, and each different professional has different new standards that they're working with too. So if the speech professional feels like they can do an adequate assessment over Zoom, then great, forge ahead. So I think they need to be creative to do with ongoing finding of eligibility. I think the other important thing too is that if that process has started, to assess for eligibility, and the kiddo doesn't have an IEP yet, then there should be some benchmarks going on, some kind of check-in, some kind of IEP meeting, maybe call a new IEP meeting and say, look, we clearly can't get these parts of it, but we'll address these now. You can certainly do the parent rating scales. Those can just be sent home. There's lots you can be doing. And maybe there's enough info from before. So if this, I don't know if this kiddo is young or old, but if the kiddo is, let's say, 8 years old and they just came in from another school district and they used to get services from CDS, then there's some stuff there that maybe the team can already use and just say, well, we've got enough to go ahead. Let's just go ahead and find eligibility. Let's create an IEP now, and then we'll meet again once we've got more information. So I think teams should get creative and try to dig through what they already have.
So just to be clear, I want to just go back to when a family has an IEP, the IEP is running out, let's say in June, they're not able to hold an IEP. The school then can carry that IEP onward without meeting, or do they have to meet to say, let's just stay with this one and continue?
No, they can just continue on. And that's also the information coming from the state. They're saying you can just continue on with the existing IEP.
So that's good information for families. So their school district shouldn't come back and say, well, no, it expired in June and we're not able to meet, so you're done for now, and we'll pick up.
No, that would be bad. That would be bad.
That would be bad. I was that would be bad. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you about is, and this is probably going to be a hot topic, but I'm concerned myself with it, is can we talk about extended school year? Because we meaning, some of the colleagues in the areas, that we talk about, Maine Parent Federation is in that, and Nancy from the Disability Council, and of course, Atlee and you, we've been talking about some of our kids and not having the extended school years. You're talking kids are going to be out and not connected with some of them 5 months. Right. So is the Department of Education, or should they be looking at maybe having extended school year for the individuals that truly really do need this? This is why they have it on their IEP, and having something, or looking at plans around, meeting in person on a limited basis, or some connection. I really feel that we need to be looking at, it's too long of a process, especially for individuals that have autism.
Sure.
This is huge for them to be out so long
Yeah.
and no support. So what's your kind of take on that?
Yeah. So, well, in terms of what we heard so far from DOE, from MDOE, is that people should plan on having ESY and having it virtually. They haven't yet delved into what in person could look like. We heard that they're working on that. There might be some kind of parity with the other businesses that are opening, some kind of checklist maybe, but that's all just chatter. There's nothing official yet. And I mean, so far under the current closures, the executive orders, it's through the 31st of May that the in-person instruction can't be held for K through 12. So, we're looking beyond that. And so perhaps for June, starting in June, they're going to relax some of those ability to meet in person with full safety and distancing and PPE if they need it, whatever it is. Because I think you're right. There's certain kids that just are going to need that, and they're not going to benefit in the same way from just an all Zoom ESY.
I guess I want to dive in a little more deep on this.
Yeah.
Can a parent, so I'm talking about a parent who has a child with autism that, is really just maintaining their, at this point, but another month probably isn't going to do that family really good. Can that parent make a request to the district, letting them know, or putting together something that says that they have had severe regression, and make a request and actually come up with their own plan? Is that something that the school district would be? I don't think so. Or you think they'd be more open and say, yeah, maybe we could do something? Because I think that parents aren't, they need to voice really what's going on in their families.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think families should speak up where they can, and the more organized they can be, the better. That sounds awesome, to be able to come up with a plan and say, look, I've taken this, taken it off your plate. I've got a plan ready. All you got to do is show up for these dates and these times. And
yeah,
there's no guarantee that the school is going to go with that. But I know that a lot of schools are just looking for answers like everyone else. And they're getting some guidance from the state and from the national folks. But a lot of people are just saying, well, it's local control. You guys get to decide. And it's your kiddos, and we support you, but we're not going to tell you what to do. And so that cuts both ways. I think a lot of schools would love to be told what they should do.
Well, and I think that guidance comes back from, we see this happening around our state with other departments where they're reaching out to the district, or they may be reaching out to the providers, and they may be saying, this is back in your hands. And then the families, aren't getting any information. They're not getting contacted by their district or by their case manager or by their provider doing Section 28. And the meetings right now that are set up seem to be more provider-based versus family-based. So
yeah.
Is there something maybe, that we could do to help in this area? I mean, I know one of the things that we're doing right now, with the Developmental Disability Council and Maine Parent Federation, and we've reached out to you guys through Disability Rights, is we got a survey we're putting together, because our first survey that we did, we really had 154 families respond to it. So our survey that we're going to put together next is, what does reentry into school look like? And give us your thoughts. And
right.
We hope to put this out by the end of the month, but I think that's going to be very interesting and great information to share with the department, because nobody's asking the families how they're feeling.
Yeah. And I think from the DOE's point of view, they'll accept any comments, any calls from anybody. But again, they likely hear mostly from well-meaning districts and families that are perhaps already are down the track of doing the right thing, and they just want to make sure it's the right thing. But I think they're hearing less from the families that we hear from, you and I,
right. Right.
You know,
Because I
the
don't
ones,
think they know they can reach out to actual Department of Education versus just their school district.
right, they may not know. Yeah, I would encourage folks to speak up. And the surveys are awesome. I mean, that's a great way to
Yeah, and the
compile it.
data, what we got from the first one, thank you, Nancy, for pulling it once we got all of it back, but it was really, it told us a lot with, I think it was like either 42% not hearing from their school district or their, case managers or whatnot. It was, difficult to see that there's families out there, and all we hear from is the fabulous things that are happening.
Right.
And there are some good things, so I don't want it to be all, Debbie Downer here, but because there's some school districts stepping up to the plate, doing above and beyond.
Yep.
And I just feel sad for the families that don't have that district, that are in a district where they're like, oh, well, we're closed. So,
Right. Yeah.
and I just don't get how that can be. It still makes me go, what? I don't understand it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know it kind of goes back to that local control thing too. You know, we see different services available in different places, but I totally agree. I mean,
Yeah.
they need to hear from families.
Yeah, so I think, when that survey comes out, we'll make sure that we have it, advertised in many different places. But another thing I can add to some of the families that are on right now is that next Friday, my special guest is Dr. Jim Ball, and our whole hour is going to talk about how do we look at reentry into schools after my child's been out for 2 months, 3 months, with hopefully specific things that we can start to do and work on now to help that child, go back to a school district. I mean, you got to remember that individuals with autisms, they do have a routine, and when that routine is broken, a new routine starts. So
Right.
what is their new routine? Well, their new routine isn't going to be what the school's going to do back in
Right.
hopefully September.
Yeah.
So we have to prepare those families, and not just the families. I'm thinking the schools need to be really prepared. They're going to get some pushback from these kids. And so I'm hoping Jim will have some really great ideas. So that'll be next Friday's, segment that I'll be doing, and he'll have a lot of great tips and techniques around that. So
Yeah. My hope would be that between now and September, we're using that as the start date.
I'm so proud. I keep saying September because I want it to be so.
No, I know we need to say something. So between now and any kind of re-entry, I would expect that each kid should know what that re-entry looks like, and it should be very creative. If the distance learning happened to be working great for kids in some way, maybe integrating that, some kind of blended return. It's unlikely that all kids are just going to walk right into the school. There'll be some kind of maybe blue days, white days, and online some and not. So there's going to be lots of new needs for kids too. Like you mentioned, the trauma and the new schedule. That's going to be a big impact.
I think, like you just mentioned, each child is so different, and we're not just talking individuals with disabilities. I mean, even your typical child who's been used to going to school, and all of a sudden their 6 hours is gone, and they've been home, and now they have 9 hours of the internet, or they're thrown into this frenzy, and getting them back to some sort of stage. Each child, it will look different, and I am really hoping that the department is going to look at that and say, you know what, they are individual. And at least provide guidance to the districts, because right now I don't think that their guidance has any weight with it. I guess that's what I want to say. It's kind of like you can if you want, but something a little more heavy, and that's what I'm hoping, maybe when we do this survey and they can see what the fear is or what not the fear is, because the survey does have some really specific questions. It's going to be a short survey. It won't take you long. Right now, I think it's only like 8 questions. And of course, we're waiting for your input on that. And once we can, get that ready and get it out there, I think that's going to be really important information for the department. And I do hope they take it seriously, because nobody is going to the families. I see it all around. I sit on many Zoom meetings, and they're all provider or school district based. They're not family orientated. And we've asked on 2 different levels to have a meeting just for families or for adults, for families who have adults. And we're yet to have anything around that. And so that's why I think what we're doing, between all of us, between, Maine Parent Federation and the Disability Council and what you guys are doing, we're the ones really trying to reach out to the families.
Right.
And, I know Gear's doing some things too around mental health.
Right.
NAMI has some really great hotlines that they're also doing for teens, because we know they're struggling too, and you certainly want to make sure you keep your eye on your teens. It is, for me, it's kind of like nobody ever expected this, although I think if you look back at some literature, you'd see where some people were saying, what if,
Yeah.
So hopefully what we've learned, we can carry forward with, and we know that learning is in a different style is okay. And maybe that would be helpful for the future when the school can be like, yeah, well, we can do something remote for this child,
Absolutely. Oh yeah. That was one of my first thoughts when this was happening was, well, if a kiddo needs anything remote in the future, the school can't say they don't know how to do that, because
Yeah.
now they should be experts,
Well,
And-
now I don't know about experts, but we'll give
well,
them
they
the
should have
benefit.
had
Okay.
to think about it. Yeah.
I think we're all learning here. Like I have said in the past, it's like, the society wasn't used to being, online doing coffee with Cathy. That was not a segment. We did it just because we wanted families to know that there's something out there, there's something we can provide you. And although we can still answer our phone calls and emails, it's still different. Our agency now is suffering the no summer camps. That's another thing that a lot of families had summer for summer camps. So we have to look differently at things and how we can do things. And how has it changed your agency, Ben? This.
Well, I mean, just in everyday life, we're all remote as well. And, but I think I want to emphasize too, just on what you just said, is that we're totally open for business. We have all the same capacity, staff, and we're anxious to get people's calls. So I hope people reach out. And even if it's just to let us hear your story so we can share it, it might not be, a big legal moment, to work on, but hey, we want to hear from you. So in terms of ours, I mean, the cases are just looking a lot different. There's less of the issues of suspensions and expulsions and, disruptive behavior in the classroom. And there's more about accessing the curriculum and,
So
making
I'm just thinking of that. You just said that something, and I was like going, so does that mean that when a child is doing learning by the internet, they can't get suspended? What if they swear on the Zoom meeting or something? I mean,
that's a good question. I haven't run into that, and luckily, I think there's just a lot of forgiveness and it's a good question. It's a good question.
Because I was thinking about that, going, wait, how are they doing that now? We're in such a different way that you have to stop sometimes and go, wait a minute, how does this work now if I don't have this, or I can do this or not? Right. So that is funny.
Yeah. But on that same point, I'll just say, if there happens to be somebody that was suspended or expelled, prior to this time, and they're not back in school, that to me is a problem, and they should reach back out to the school and say, listen, the active issue, which was disrupting the class or X thing, that those aren't current anymore. This is a whole new world, and there's no reason that kid can't access the Zoom class with everybody else and be progressing. And so if that's coming up, I would encourage people to call us.
So, and there's another thing that I have heard a couple of times now, and I was wondering, your opinion on this is, I've heard some families say, we've chosen not to participate in the academics virtually. What happens with that family? Does that child, okay, so I'm a parent and I say, no, I know he's not going to do good virtually. Right. Do they start out back in the same grade or no? I guess what happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's certainly the ability of parents to say that this isn't going to work. This doesn't work for my kid. I would encourage them, like you said, coming up with your own plan. Mm-hmm. If they can think of something that might work better, given a safe environment, like if they really need in-person services, they should ask for them. Make the school say yes or no to things. But but your question was, what does things look like after that? I think you would take the kid where they are when they come back or are ready to access those things, and the team should meet and talk about if things have changed, and I don't think it should change the kids' needs. Those are probably the same as before.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It's when you think about it in that retrospect, that we've had families that they know that, you know, the online learning just isn't going to happen.
Right.
So my mind automatically goes to, so what are they doing? You know,
Right.
and supporting them.
Yeah.
You know, the support level, you know, wasn't a lot when they were in school, you know, besides the schooling and if they had Section 28, but some agencies are choosing not to go into the home.
Right.
Which is their choice, but for that family, it wasn't their choice.
Right.
It's difficult.
Yeah, I really feel for some families. I mean, the rug has been pulled out from under a lot of families, and the school is sometimes a lifeline, you know, even if they don't have access to those provider services in the home. And so if that's missing too, man, that's got to be the toughest thing.
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage them to reach back out to the school, tell them why the thing that they're offering won't work. You know, if they're offering sending home packets, and say, do your best with the packets, have them explain why that won't work. And, you know, I've heard, like you said, there's good stuff going on. And I just heard today from a BCBA who said, yep, you know, basically all the old plans are out, and now I'll go in and I'll sit in on a morning meeting where I've got a couple kids that I've been watching and do some observing, and then follow up with the teacher and say, hey, you know, when you do your Zoom morning meeting, make sure to do X thing for this kid, because, you know, maybe bring up a visual for that kiddo. So there's all this creative training and Zoom combination stuff going on. I know some school psychologists are also sitting in on classroom meetings, Zoom meetings, just to kind of observe, and not really kid specific. And so you've got all these professionals that perhaps have time to participate, and you could throw them in the mix and have them as a part of the team, even if they weren't before. So there's good stuff happening.
Yeah. And what's your opinion on, so I've been hearing from some families that they're saying, oh, my ed tech is, you know, chiming in with my child every day. They have like a half hour where they're, you know, either doing an activity together or doing something. Should we be utilizing the ed techs more right now? Because, you know, that ed tech might have access to maybe 3 kids for that day. And if they can connect with those 3 kids for an hour every day, that's going to help, you know, in that process too. Shouldn't we be using them more?
Yes.
I mean, yeah. I think that some of them are saying, no, we haven't heard from anybody. And that's where I go, but everybody's still, you know, I mean, school's supposed to be 6 hours.
Right.
You're getting like I did an hour Zoom meeting, and what's happening the rest of the time? I guess that's where I just want to know.
It's a really good question. I think that's why we've got to at least set some baseline to be like, you should have regular contact. You should be having some instruction, some plan, and they should be addressing every part of your IEP in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to look different for every district, every kid, but stuff should be happening and should be frequent. That's a good question though, Cathy. I mean, all the teachers are still getting paid. All the hourly workers are still getting paid. So they're around. They might be working on other things, but they're available. So.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe just, you know, I just want to encourage the families, if you are not having good connections with your district, try, you know, to reach out to them again. Again, you know, we're here to help. DRM's here to help.
Yep.
If you want to ask DOE directly, you can go to the dispute resolution on the main DOE page. I don't know if we put that in the comment section. I just think there's avenues and there's ways, and when our survey comes out, providing real information, no matter what it looks like, so we can then make a case to the department. I do think that in the future, if we see something like this again, we'll be prepared, ready, and there'll be guidance, you know,
right.
and we should be helping to form that guidance. It shouldn't just be coming from the teachers, because it's like, we've been hearing things about teachers where they didn't have closure with their classroom, and I get that. That is sad, but it's really not about that. It's about the kids, and I just really feel for some of these families who are dealing with a lot of different things. Let me see if we have any other questions as we're wrapping up here. So let me check my questions. So let's see.
I'd like to put a plug in too. If people haven't seen it, there's a video of Cathy wearing a crazy looking Patriots jersey. It's pretty cool.
It's a very nice jersey. Although 2 of my characters on my jersey are not
I know. Oh boy. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a big Brady fan, and I went to my very first game. It's a good thing I did, because what are you gonna do, right? So let me see. Mary's just thanking us. Mary Shrinai. Hi, Mary. Just thanking us that her son's 23 and in the past 23 years old, and it's great to learn what's happening, and this information can be useful for her grandson. So she's passing it on. Kendra has 3 kids. Kendra is a case manager. 3 kids on her caseload. They all they all have kids that go to school. They're getting their work completed in just a few hours. When they tell me there is a lot of wasted time at school, lunch, recess, they are not entirely wrong. I guess I can see that. Some schools also have, specials and everything thrown in. So the technical academic learning, I guess, is shorter than that 6 hours. So I guess you're right. And we know that our kids won't be able to sit through 6 hours worth of academic learning. So, So I think, Ben, I don't know if you want to do a wrap up. Do you have anything else you want to add? I don't have any other questions that come on thing. And I think we covered some really good ground too.
Yeah. This is great, Cathy. No, I would just say thanks for having me. And I would say, kind of just as a general message, families should speak up, be clear, make requests, get things down in writing. And if things don't go well, reach out to ASM and DRM and MDDC. Let us know. We want to hear.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the survey is going to show a lot, and we'll be able to share that. So thank everybody for coming today. You can also see this recorded. We're going to put it on our website. So Ben, I don't know if I told you that, but you're living in now on our website.
That's fine. Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'll just put a plug, on Disability Rights Maine website, we have a COVID-19 kind of portal. And when you go there, you'll see all of the guidance that we've done about education, and links to our other video that we did with Maine Parent Federation. And we'll put this one there too. Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Ben, for joining me today. So go and fill your cup, and great afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye. You're off live. Okay, we're off live. Oh, he hung up. Okay, that's fine. So we will stop recording.